Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Duke Football Coverage Podcast, brought to you as always by Bull City Coordinators. You can check us out on our website, bullcitycoordinators.com, where we are working on a 4-part history of the Coach Cutcliffe era. I have to write part 4, but I'm struggling to do it because it involves reliving a lot of painful and unfortunate memories, and I've already covered it extensively on the blog anyway, but I will get to it, I promise. You can also check us out on Twitter at DukeFB Coverage. Getting to our next guest, he is one of the all-time great Duke quarterbacks, played in the NFL for 10 seasons with the Giants and the Cardinals. And when I was doing my research for this interview, I noticed that he played right around maybe 2 full seasons under center, and he really made a mark on the Duke record book. He is 9th in total passing yards, 1st in single game passing yards at 479. And we will talk about the game in which he set that record, I promise you. 7th in career passing touchdowns with 42, tied for 4th in single season passing touchdowns at 20, 3rd in single season touchdowns overall, 25 in the 91 season, 8th in total career touchdowns at 49, and 9th in total offensive yards. Dave Brown, welcome to the podcast. How are you, sir?
I'm great, Ben. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I saw that you were on the Rich Eisen show around the time that Daniel Jones got drafted. And while this might be a slight step down in production quality and national reach, I like to think of myself as the Rich Eisen show of Duke football podcast. So I hope this you fit right in here.
No, absolutely. It's it's out in LA. You're down in North Carolina, but I'm sure the quality's the
same. Well, I'm actually in Roanoke, Virginia.
Okay.
Little different. But one thing that I like to do when we start the interview is give you a chance to introduce yourself to the listening audience. Once a lot of the players leave Duke and they go to the NFL career, we kind of fall out of touch with them. So why don't you tell us what you've been doing since your NFL career ended in 2001?
Yeah, great. So I ended my last season was 2001. In 2002, you sort of have to grow up and find a real job. And, I did the announcing route for about a year. I was did the pregame and postgame shows for the Philadelphia Eagles on Comcast Network. And then at the same time realized that I had to go out and get a real job as well. So I started my career at New York Life to really learn the asset management business, investments. And after, now 18 or 20 years of doing it, I run a group within a firm called Moelis & Company, which is a boutique investment bank based in New York City. And I lead a group that basically raises money for private equity funds. So guys who buy and sell companies need capital to do that. My team is set up to really go out and try to provide that capital for those individuals to go buy and sell companies. So I've got 3 kids. I've got 2 girls and a son. My oldest is at Fairfield University. My middle daughter is at Penn State. And I have a son who is a junior in high school.
And what is been easier for you, playing in the NFL and the media market or raising children?
That's a great question. Being in New York, the media can be pretty rough. So I would probably say raising kids. It's certainly a lot more gratifying. But yeah, raising kids is a lot easier.
Well, you say that about it being more gratifying. When I was in law school, one of my buddies was a big Giants fan, and we were there for the 2008 season when they upset the Patriots. And I asked him, I said, Ian, are you going to stop booing Eli Manning now? I'll boo him the first time he throws an interception.
Yeah.
And what you can't even beating a then undefeated team doesn't get you any break with the Giants fans. What was your experience with that like at times?
Yeah, listen, they, you pay a lot of money for those seats. You have the right to offer your opinion, whether it's valid or not. But certainly, the teams that I was on, I got there in '92. I was really the backup behind Phil Simms and Jeff Hostetler. So I had a lot of learning to do and had 2 great mentors to learn from. And that team was, probably a little long in the tooth. They just had won 2 Super Bowls. A lot of the veterans were pretty, getting older. Guys like Lawrence Taylor on that team, Phil Simms. They had a really, really strong team. But again, they were getting old. So I think the fan base was really excited about the team they had. And then I don't think they appreciated maybe the build that had to take place for them to come back to, the national and league prominence that they had at one time. And fortunately or unfortunately for me, I was kind of stuck in the middle of that. So I'm sure there's a lot more questions around that, but that's really kind of the way that I sort of bridged my career.
Let's talk a little bit about how you got into football. Tell us where you're from originally and when you started playing the sport.
Yeah, so I'm from Westfield, New Jersey. Still live here today. The first Little League team was set up in fourth grade. My parents did not want me to play. They thought I was too young. So they drove me over for my third year of soccer signups. And true story, I actually locked my dad out of the car. He got out of the car to go sign me up, and I refused to get out of the car and locked him out. And I said, I'm not going. I want to play football. So that was enough, I think, for him to say I was really interested. So I went out next week and signed up for football and was a tight end my first year, and then played quarterback every year after that.
Did Dad get back at you for locking him out of the car? I imagine my father would have.
Yeah, he became the coach, which, that's always an interesting dynamic when your dad's the coach. But no, my dad was a great coach, but he was rough on me and rough on all of us.
Well, I got to switch gears for just 1 second. We'll come back to it. But since we're talking about fathers, I meant to say this at the beginning of the show, but I just want to give a shout out to my dad who's recovering from left knee replacement surgery. Big surgery, but he went through it well. He's doing fine. So I meant to say that at the beginning. So Dad, don't get too upset at me for forgetting to put you up at the top of the show. But why don't we talk about, as you developed in your career, you're getting into high school and you're getting recruited, and then you end up going to Duke. Can you talk us through what your recruitment process was like and how you ended up as a Blue Devil?
Yeah, so I played a little bit as a sophomore in high school, not much. But then my junior had a pretty good year. But back then I was probably 6'5", 170 pounds. And my high school, actually, we ran the freeze option. So I don't know if you remember way back when Donovan McNabb was quarterback for Syracuse. It was sort of an I formation option scheme. And you can imagine a 6'5", 170 pound, quarterback trying to run an option scheme. So we were 5-4, didn't have a ton of success, but we were in third down a lot because of the running game wasn't as potent. We ran a lot of bootlegs, and I did a lot of things on the run. I think my size and arm strength sort of attracted people to me sort of in my junior year. Senior year, stayed with that same offense, but threw a little bit more. But I'll be honest with you, I probably averaged maybe 10 passes a game in high school. And then, there was I started getting letters pretty much every day from teams all over the country. And I narrowed it down to my 5 official visits were Boston College, Duke, Iowa, Michigan, and Maryland. And it was interesting. So at the time, Spurrier was the coach at Duke. There was, Bicknell was up at Boston College. Hayden Fry was at Iowa. There were some, really some high-powered coaches out there. And one of the funny stories was I was playing high school basketball at the time, and I really didn't want to miss my high school basketball games to go to these official visits, because what they would have you do is fly in on a Friday night, spend the whole weekend, and I would inevitably miss 1 or 2 basketball games. So I asked a lot of the coaches if they'd just come up and I could speak to them at my high school. So Spurrier came up to one of my high school basketball games, and the offensive coordinator for Boston College was also in the building. And we were playing a team, and it was a crosstown rival. And the game kind of got out of control. We were ahead by a lot. And late in the game, I was already taken out of the game, and there was a bench clearing brawl during the game where fans came out of the stands. And it was one of the ugliest scenes maybe in my high school's history. And it just so happened that Spurrier was there and several other coaches. And, in all my years at Duke, and even today, Spurrier always remembers that and always, laughs at sort of the mean streets of Westfield, New Jersey, which is, about as nice a town as you can find in the suburbs of New Jersey. But it was pretty remarkable a day on a recruiting trip for me.
So was Coach Spurrier the lead guy recruiting you at Duke?
There's a guy, Jim Collins, who really did a great job. When I look back at that Duke team I was on and success we had, a lot of the core players that were successful were recruited by Coach Collins, and they were all from New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and New York. And he did an unbelievable job. And then, certainly Coach Spurrier was involved sort of late in the process.
Tell us a little bit about Coach Spurrier as a recruiter. We'll get to him as a coach in a minute, but what was it that made him unique as a recruiter and maybe made Coach Collins unique as well?
Yeah, I think Coach Collins, it was just the way that he connected with me, and I think the way he connected with all of us. He definitely was a guy who you could tell he cared. It wasn't, I think a lot of guys have a specific playbook. They feel like they have to say certain things and do certain things and show you. And I think, at least for me, he just connected with me personally. And I think that was a big winning point for him. With Spurrier, candidly, it was, he came to our high school and with a reel of film and brought me into a room. He showed me a game they played. I think it was homecoming versus Georgia Tech, where Steve Sladen threw 6 touchdown passes. And they were doing, double reverse passes and flea flickers. And I think Sladen may have thrown it like 63 times that game. And for a guy who was running the freeze option, throwing it 10 times a game, in high school, that just really excited me about what the possibilities were. I'll be honest, I didn't know much about his history as a player. My father was the one that was telling me that he was a Heisman Trophy winner and was, had all these really, unbelievable accolades as a player. But to me, what was interesting was his ability to really design a brand new style of offense that not a lot of guys were running at the time.
So where do you think all the interest in you came from? If you're only getting like 10 passes a game, I can imagine you don't have a lot of like game film or highlights. What do you think it was that was causing people to say, hey, let's go check out Dave Brown?
Yeah, I think size certainly was the biggest thing. Being in high school at the time, 6'5", certainly in that era, size was a big thing for quarterbacks. I would say arm strength. We did, when we did throw it, a lot of them were deep passes. So I would roll out and throw a lot of post patterns and things. And I think the ability to kind of put the ball up there high and connect with receivers deep was probably the thing that attracted everyone the most, was just arm strength.
What made you end up choosing Duke over the other schools that you mentioned? And I'm glad you didn't go to Maryland, because I get a lot of stuff about Maryland that'll get an E rating on the podcast, which we don't need. But what brought you to Duke?
Yeah. So, again, I had great offers: Michigan, Iowa, Maryland, Boston College, et cetera. And I think for me, it was a couple of things. One, coming out of a system that I was played in high school, I'll be honest with you, I didn't know how good I was or how good I could be. And I felt like if I went to a Michigan or a Iowa, where they would recruit the best players every single year, maybe I wouldn't have the greatest opportunity to play right away as I would at other schools. And I think along those same lines, going to Duke was a decision. I know this is kind of their motto down there. It's sort of a life decision. It's not a 4-year decision. And I felt like if I went there, I'd play for a great coach. I'd play for an unbelievable system. But also, again, coming out of a system where I didn't really do a whole lot, if I didn't reach the goals I had for myself, I would get a great degree and graduate and have good job possibilities outside of that. So that was really a big weighing factor in why I chose Duke.
Well, and you mentioned this, Duke had actually produced some pretty good quarterbacks, certainly, and you were part of that. You had Ben Bennett, Steve Sladen, Anthony Dilweg, Spence Fisher, of course, came after. You mentioned the highlight reel of Sladen against Georgia Tech, but did that help you make the decision at all?
Yeah, Sladen was unbelievable. Ben Bennett, certainly his days. I think also the Tampa Bay Bandits, some of the films that he would show of the Bandits with John Reeves, a quarterback, et cetera, all that factored into it. And really, I didn't know of Anthony Dilweg. He didn't play until my freshman year, really. He had the one game, I think, at Clemson where he threw for 300 yards, where he subbed in for Sladen. But really, it was the Sladen show for many, many years under Spurrier. And that was, seeing what he did against Georgia Tech and then following him was pretty incredible, the numbers he was putting up.
Now, you were at Duke from 88 until, I guess, you finished the 91 season, and then you went pro, what would have been the 92 year. Is that
correct? That's right. Yep.
Walk us through the 98 season and what that was like, because I feel like that is one that gets overlooked a lot by Duke fans, in large part because of the 89 season with the ACC championship with Virginia. But can you walk us through that year? You guys were 7-3-1. You were pretty good.
Yeah, it was for me. It was a huge learning experience. I was a freshman. I remember riding on the bus to go to our first game was at Northwestern, and just sort of like, nodding my head to myself, thinking like, this is what big time college football is all about. I was so excited to be there. And then just seeing what Anthony Dilweg did on a really a game by game basis, putting up 300 plus yards every game. It was really, really an amazing, he was an amazing teacher for me to be able to sit there and watch what he could do. The system was so complex. I was the only real freshman quarterback that they had. So I was under the gun a lot with Spurrier. It was a learning process every single day, especially, the first week you're just have freshman practices only. So it was really Coach Spurrier and I in a meeting room for several hours a day, grilling me on all the different nuances of the offense. But being a part of that team and seeing how, everyone connected, I think it was the time that maybe Duke didn't know they were that good, and then maybe figured it out towards the end of the year that said, hey, we can play with anybody that we go up against. And I think that was really the biggest thing. Beating Tennessee down to Tennessee was a big shock to, I think, the whole NCAA in some respects. And I think the thing I always remember is the NC State game, and it's probably a pretty funny pep talk, but it was a pregame talk that Spurrier mentioned. He goes, listen, guys, if we win this game, we're going to be in the bowl game. And if we hold this team to under 43 points, we're going to win the game. There's not a whole lot of coaches out there that are telling your team they need to hold someone under 43 points to win the game. But he was spot on. We ended up tying 43 all, and they ended up taking NC State to the Peach Bowl over us. So it was, a pretty amazing prediction by him. But he was, he knew exactly. He sort of held the pulse of the team at the time.
How did you guys feel about not getting to a bowl game that season? I know you guys were, I think, 3-3 in conference, but overall the record 7-3-1 was pretty darn good.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it comes down to money. I'm sure at the time where the fan bases, could a smaller private school in the South deliver as many fans as a larger public institution in the South. I think that was probably the biggest factor. I think had we been at a state school or a larger school with a bigger fan base at the time, I think we would have certainly been in our bowl game. But yeah, we were disappointed. I mean, I think Spurrier obviously was super vocal after the game, having, feel like we got the wrong end of a few calls in that game, which I know he ended up being suspended for. But if anything, it motivated us to I mean, one, realize that we can play with anybody, and two, I think that set up what was, the really successful year the following year.
Let me ask you about that. You mentioned he got suspended for the following game. That's the game against North Carolina, which is famous for a number of reasons, but primarily he apparently Coach Spurrier sent plays to Coach Franks during the game through someone on a golf cart. Did you guys have any idea what was going on or know anything about that?
No, at the time, no one knew anything about that. I've heard subsequent stories about that later on in life, but listen, if I was Coach Spurrier, I'd be doing the same thing. I mean, he was the offensive coordinator. He was the head coach. He was the quarterback coach. He was everything on offense. And listen, if you're playing your arch rival, if you're playing anyone and you're the head coach, you're going to find a way to get an edge. And listen, I think it was great what he did. Well,
so the mood going into 1989 is positive. Did you have an idea as to who the starter was going to be? How did it come about? I know Billy Ray transferred in. You end up playing very, very well when you come in, but just walk us through kind of the mindset that you had about being the quarterback there, and also the team's mindset going into the season.
Yeah. So after the '88 season, going into spring ball, I was assumed that I was going to compete for the starting job with a guy named Kenny Hull. And then all of a sudden, we get a transfer from Alabama, Billy Ray. And that was sort of a shock to all of our systems, because here's a guy who was, at the time, coming out of high school, a number 2 recruit behind Jeff George. He actually played a little bit at Alabama. And he was a phenomenal athlete. I mean, he was probably 6'4", ran a 4.5 40, could jump out of the gym. And we play pickup basketball games and see the athlete this guy was. So, to me, it was just another, person sort of standing in my way of something that I wanted to really achieve. And I thought I made a lot of great strides in the fall of '88, really trying to understand the offense. So I was pretty confident heading into the spring, and I didn't have a great spring, candidly. The system overwhelmed me a bit. The system Spurrier has is so much focused on the quarterback. I often told people it was his play call was essentially a suggestion. It was something that he anticipated, but you as the quarterback had to adjust the play and get the team into the best situation possible at any given time. And I just, was having trouble trying to get to that point. And it got so bad that at the last spring game practice, when it was over, Coach Spurrier pulled me aside, congratulated everyone on a great spring and asked me to stay after practice. And he said, listen, I sort of had you factored in to be the starter. You didn't win the job. Billy's going to be the starter next year. But I promise you're going to play in the first game, but you just got to keep improving. And that was, a really disappointing moment, maybe the seminal moment of my career to say, you really got to work harder. You really got to study more. You really got to lift more and do things a lot more in line to be competitive. And that started really a really hard summer for me of working out and getting my face in the playbook. And I think that's what set up maybe what happened the following year.
Well, it certainly paid off when you got your opportunity. Nobody can question that. But 89 started out a little slow. You guys are 1-3, and you have a game against Clemson, which was an ugly, wet, rainy, turnover-filled game. I think Clemson picked it off a couple of times and then got stripped, and you guys picked it up. I mean, it was not pretty. And then you played a little bit. Cuthbert comes in, and he gets that great touchdown, and you guys win 7 straight. What was that Clemson game like, and how much did it mean to you all?
Yeah, I think, backing up 1 week before that, we played Virginia, and we got beat up pretty badly. And that I got in the fourth quarter of that game and actually threw 3 touchdown passes in the fourth quarter. And so, as miserable as that game was for the team, in the back of my mind that was probably the first time where I felt like, I could probably play. I think I can be successful in this system. And I think at that time too, Coach Spurrier maybe began to get a lot more confident that I could play as well. So rolling into Clemson, I thought I might get a chance to play a little bit, but Billy was a starter and Billy was playing pretty well. I think at that time I got in one play. It was right before the end of the half. I was asked to throw a Hail Mary and I rolled out and slipped and fell. And Coach Spurrier basically chased me into the locker room the entire way, screaming at me. But no, I think at that time that's when our team found our identity. I think we, the first 3 or 4 games, we were trying to be maybe someone we weren't. And in that game in the mud, we figured out we were a, risk it all blitz kind of defense. We were a heavy running game with a guy like Cuthbert that could, run over people. I think at times we could be a little bit too cute on offense. And I think at that point we realized we have the horses to run it. We can throw it, obviously. But the biggest thing to me was the defensive mindset. It was, we're going to isolate our corners. We've got a great safety, and we're just going to blitz every single down and see what happens. And I think the team embraced that kind of style, and that's what took us the rest of the year.
We also had a guy like Clarkson Hines to throw the ball to, which I'm sure helped. What was playing with him like?
It was great. I mean, he was, every single week, I'm sure the defense that we played against had him highlighted, and they had, I'm sure brackets trying to figure out how to stop him. And I think that's what made Coach Spurrier so creative was, we moved him around a lot. So he was a split end one week. He was, on the X the other side. He was a Z one week. And I think from, a defensive point of view, it's really hard to sort of build a game plan where you don't know where this guy is. And in a way, he was a ghost. You never really knew which side of the ball he was going to be on. And I think that goes to Clarkston too, because he had to learn a lot. He probably learned more positions than anyone on the team because he had to play them all. He could line up in a tight end sometimes. He could line up in the backfield sometimes. And I give him a lot of credit for just his ability to kind of create and develop and adapt to what the game plan was every single week. And just as a mentor, he really was a great teacher for the guys below him, the Walter Joneses of the team, the Mark Mazes, the Brad Breedloves, guys like that kind of looked up to him and really set us up and set them up for their really successful careers at Duke as well.
Well, walk us through the rest of the season. You're on the hot streak. You guys are playing very, very well. And then you come in and play against Wake Forest. How did that come about?
Yeah, so Billy got hurt. I think the week before was Georgia Tech. He hurt his shoulder. And like I said, I after that Virginia game, I started to get a little bit of playing time here and there in games, series here, series there. And then it was my week to really go out and play. Billy tried to go with it, but couldn't make it. So we were playing at Wake Forest. sort of the famous story of this is, obviously Cuthbert was running wild on everybody. I think he just came off a 200-yard game against Georgia Tech. And, here comes this backup quarterback, and everyone in the world assumed that this is going to be a smash mouth. We're going to run Cuthbert every single play and see what happens. And so breakfast that morning before the Wake Forest game, Coach Spurrier comes over and he asked me, what I thought, the first play should be. And obviously it's my first start. I'm going to defer to him. And there were some Cheerios on the table, and he basically lined up the field with Cheerios and said, I'm thinking about this. Why don't we, fake a handoff to Cuddy, and we'll put Clarkston on an option route. If it's a zone cover 2, we'll put him on a corner route. And if it's a man or a cover 3, we're going to put him on a go route and just throw it up there and see what happens. And so, sure. I mean, let's give it a shot. And it just so happened it was the perfect play call. We faked off the right tackle to Cuddy, and I threw a deep pass. I think it was a 76-yard touchdown pass on the very first play of my first start to Clarkson Hines. So from that point on, the confidence was there, and we ended up having a great day. I threw for 444 yards and 4 touchdowns. I think Clarkson had 3 of those touchdowns, and it was just, you couldn't have written a better script for a first start for a kid who was basically a sophomore in college.
And one of those was for 97 yards, which I think is still right around the longest pass play in Duke scrimmage history. So, yeah, you played okay. You did all right. A couple of things Spurrier had for you to work on, but, that's pretty good.
Yeah, it was amazing. I think, again, going back to my original point about, Spurrier giving suggestions rather than, making you run the play. That 97-yarder was supposed to be a running play. But when you go to line of scrimmage and there's 9 guys standing there and you've got one-on-one coverage with Clarkston, had I not checked to a deep pattern, he'd have yelled at me like everyone would have been disappointed I didn't execute that play. So having the ability to really go out there and drive the car, if you will, and have the keys to do that is a unbelievable experience as a quarterback. And one, candidly, that I missed, playing professionally. I never really had that kind of system in the pros that Spurrier let us run in college.
Well, and I understood from watching the interview you did with Rich Eisen that Dan Reeves would not let you adjust the play at the line of scrimmage or make changes. Do I have that right? And 2, how did that affect you as a quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, that was frustrating. And again, coming out of a system, and we can touch on, the experiences I had, post Spurrier for the next 2 years of, the ability that I had to call plays. But yeah, I mean, with the Giants, under Dan Reeves, it was, he'd call a play and that was the play. And there were times where I often joked, if there were 9 guys standing in the A gap and that's where the running play was supposed to go, I had no ability to change that play. And coming out of a system like Spurrier, where you had so much freedom to go into that system was pretty difficult. And again, Dan, great person. I know he just passed away, rest in peace, but he, a great coach. But I felt like that was something that was a big challenge for me as a quarterback. Speaking of John Elway during that time, he actually called me when Dan took the Giants job, and he sort of warned me about that. He goes, be ready for a little bit of frustration on play calling, because he sticks to kind of what he has. And if the defense wins, they win that one, but we're going to try and come back with him with something different on offense for us. But that was certainly a frustration for me.
Well, after the Wake Forest game, you had another good game, which I'm going to do my best to remember to link to in the blog post. It's up on YouTube, where you played your arch rival, North Carolina, and you had a good day. It was all right. You threw for 479 yards. And you guys beat them 41-0. What was that game like?
Yeah, so actually the game after Wake was NC State, and that was the one that really clinched the ACC for us effectively. It was the big game, big rival, and we had a great game against them. The UNC game was the one that if we won, we'd be co-champs. We sort of knew we were going to win, candidly. I mean, we were on a roll. They hadn't won a game all year. We knew this was going to be, I didn't think anyone realized it was going to be a 41-0 kind of game, but at that time, our confidence is so high, we knew we were going to play well. The backstory really, so I threw for 479, didn't have a great game though. I mean, I know people kind of roll their eyes, and I think if you ask Spurrier, he would say the same thing. I missed a lot of throws in that game. And if there's a famous picture of us sort of standing up in front of the scoreboard, And if you look real closely, I'm kind of hidden in the back, and I'm kind of have my head down. I'm not real happy because I just got chewed out by Spurrier in the locker room after that game because he was so upset that all the throws I did miss in that game. So it is funny, the coach, he was very demanding and he expected a lot, and he was right. I mean, there were a lot of throws that I left out there, but still, it was a great day, a great experience for the team, and we put a good one on UNC.
How did the photo at the end of the game come about? What's the story behind that?
Yeah, so we were in the locker room celebrating. We just beat them pretty badly, and we're clinched the conference championship. And really, it was just a matter. I think Coach Spurrier just said, "Hey, everyone, let's get back on the field and take a team picture." And it's interesting when you're that young. I didn't realize sort of the ramifications of it. I just thought, yeah, this is a great idea. Let's go out there and have this memory forever. I didn't think about maybe the after effects of posting that with the UNC fans, seeing a 41-0 on their own home field in front of their home scoreboard. But that's what makes rivalries great. And I'm in my home office here. I have that picture hanging on my wall, and it's one of the great pictures in Duke history.
I read an article to get ready for today that indicated that you had had a picture of that framed in your work office as well. Is that true?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I have 2 copies. It's that meaningful to me to have that in everywhere I go.
I love it. That's fantastic. Now, after the Cuthbert interview, I got a message from one of my listeners who said that there was also a photo taken against Maryland one season under the scoreboard. Do you remember anything about that?
No, I don't recall that.
Well, I know you guys bounced back and beat them. I think they'd beaten you in 88, and then you guys beat them 46-25 in 89. What do you remember anything about that win?
That one, I don't recall that one. I think Neil O'Donnell was the quarterback. I think he was at Maryland. Candidly, the only game I really remember with Maryland was when I played against them. I think it was my senior year at Maryland, and beat them pretty badly too. I think I had some good stats in that game, but I don't recall taking the picture there though.
All right. Well, we may just cut that part out then. So after the season ends, the regular season, you guys go bowling. Walk us through what the bowl game experience was like and the uncertainty about Coach Spurrier's future, because we all know he ended up leaving to go to Florida after that season. But just tell us, one, what it was like to win an ACC championship and go to a bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, winning ACC championship was amazing. I mean, just again, kind of going back to the hardship of the year before, getting so close and not really pushing through, and then going to 89 where we actually did push through was huge. The Clemson game, I'm sure to everyone, was the highlight. I mean, I think at the time they were ranked 3rd in the country, so to stop them and then really rattle off all those wins was huge. Being asked to go to a bowl game, the All-American Bowl down in Birmingham, was a thrill for all of us. I think one of the things I look back on when you do sign to a school, you want to make sure it's perfect in every way. And for us, if you think about it, a lot of us went there because of Spurrier, went there because of the education, and then we really wanted to play top flight football. I don't think any of us could have dreamed that we obviously graduated from a great school, played under a great coach, won a conference championship, and played in a bowl game. I mean, that really summarizes a full 4 years and a dream for all of us. So going down to Birmingham was fun. I think we probably had too much fun. Candidly, we Coach Spurrier was definitely on his way. He sort of clued us in that week that he had accepted a job in Florida, and he really wanted to reward us for the season that we had. So he didn't want to grind us down with too many practices. He wanted us to enjoy it, and we did that. And maybe too much, but it was still a lot of fun. We Texas Tech took the game a lot more to heart than maybe we did. I think from a practice point of view, they were having double sessions down in Lubbock, Texas, and preparing for the game. And we were overmatched. They ran it down our throats. We, Billy Ray and I both alternated at quarterback. He started the game out in the second quarter, and we went 3rd and 4th. So I think it was, the real season to us was over, if you will. Winning the conference championship was everything. the bowl game maybe was something that I think looking back in our lives now, we'd probably regret maybe didn't work as hard at, but it was still an unbelievable experience for us.
What was it like knowing that Spurrier was going to be gone? I mean, how did that affect you guys, your mood, your mindset, your thoughts about the game, your focus?
Yeah, definitely. We definitely couldn't have been as focused as we should have been. There was a lot swirling. Every day there were ESPN cameras and reporters down there, which for us was sort of new. We weren't under the national eye as much as other schools out there. So, I remember a couple of coaches would come by and they were friends with Coach Spurrier, and we were thinking maybe that's the guy to replace him, and we were trying to figure out who the next guy would be. So there was a lot of indecision, but again, it was a great week. It was a great experience. Just the game was something that we regret, I think.
So your remaining seasons at Duke were 1990, 1991. Coach Wilson takes over. Can you walk us through a little bit about what the changed Coach Wilson was like? I mean, there are players who are going through that now with Coach Cutcliffe out and Coach Elko in. Any advice you could give them and any commentary about the process you went through?
Yeah, I think it's probably different because we were big fans of Coach Wilson. He was sort of the assistant head coach under Coach Spurrier. So when Spurrier announced his departure, we were all sort of hoping that Coach Wilson would get the job, and a lot of us, Coach Butters or not Coach Butters, but Tom Butters, who's the athletic director, asked us our opinion. Who do you think should be the guy? Which I gave him a lot of credit for because he, there was a captain's group that he, would speak to from time to time, and we were really effusive with praise for Coach Wilson. So, he came on. It was a lot of the same types of things that we would do under Coach Spurrier. We sort of kept that same off-season program and off-season and really the same kind of system as well. So we were excited about that. I think the biggest difference was we had to find a new offensive coach. As I mentioned earlier, Spurrier was everything. And so he went out and hired a guy named Eddie Wilson, who was, I think he was the offensive coordinator at Cornell prior to coming to Duke. And, I know over time, during that time, there was a lot of scrutiny under Coach Eddie. And, when I look back on my experience with him, I give him a ton of credit for my development as a quarterback. He was put in a really tough position. He was asked to come in and learn the Steve Spurrier system and run that system, at Duke. So he was almost the guy that I was teaching and our other quarterbacks were teaching how to run the Spurrier system, and then he would adapt to that accordingly. And I think at times that's probably a really tough job for anyone to do. First, to replace Spurrier is one of the toughest jobs out there, but then to assume the role of offensive coordinator and it not be your system was a pretty difficult task. And I give him a huge amount of credit. I probably never, spoken this much about him, but he really entrusted me with a lot of what we were trying to do. We had two different systems of no huddle offense. One was called Army, one was called Navy. The Navy system was where I could call the plays at the line of scrimmage. Basically, everything I wanted to do was there. I could substitute players in and out and call those plays. Then we had a system called Army, was effectively a 2-minute drill, and I could run a 2-minute drill with calling my own plays. And that was, for a 19-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid to have that kind of ability to call plays and have the trust of the coaching staff to do that was spectacular for me in my development as a person and as a quarterback as well.
Tell us a little bit about, and we've talked about it kind of in some specific instances, but what Coach Spurrier was like as a teacher, just as a guy to be around. I mean, the Duke fans obviously revere him, and with good reason, but just tell us a little bit more about what he was like as a coach.
Yeah, he was he was not a yeller. He was not a screamer. He was he had a great ability to understand each person's personality and what drove that person, and he would tweak you accordingly. He finds a weakness inside of you or something that really motivated you, and he would drill down on that. And that was something that I think was probably his strongest attribute as a coach. As a player playing for him in the same position, we would have competitions daily, and he'd be out there throwing passes with receivers just like the other quarterbacks were. And I think one of the areas that he would tweak a lot of us was he would call plays or he would make throws and he completed them, and sometimes we wouldn't, and he would sort of drill us. He's like, hey, I'm an old man, and I'm able to do this. Why can't you do this as a 17, 18, 19-year-old? And that was a big motivator for all of us. Like, God, I got to show this guy I can do it. And he would have pop quizzes for us in quarterback rooms where he would draw up certain plays, and we'd hand in almost like a class where we'd have and he'd grade us on things. And it was a lot of mind games, but in a good way. It was making us better players. So we were so well prepared in practice for when the games came. And he would say this, and even Anthony Dilweg told me this as a freshman, that when the practices are so hard that the games will be easy, and that really was what it was. It was a lot of really hard days during the week for a lot of great days on Saturdays.
You go from the high of the 1989 season to then 2 seasons that are not as good from a win-loss perspective, 4 wins each season. What was that like after being where you guys were in 89 to then the 90 and 91 seasons?
Yeah, obviously it was very frustrating. We, I don't think we could sneak up on anybody then. I think we were now circled on other teams' schedules. I think the way we won games, we were blowing out a lot of teams. We were putting up a lot of big numbers on them in 89. So in 90, teams had a specific plan on how to stop us. And I don't think we adapted as well. I think certainly losing the players we lost, losing a guy like Clarkson. I think the biggest thing was losing, that offensive line was probably one of the best in Duke history, if not the best. And then, bringing in a whole new offensive line to have them learn effectively a somewhat different system was what held us back. Certainly injuries, Randy Cuthbert, was banged up the next 2 years. So I think when you look back on it, I think we were trying to keep the same identity as the team in 89 had, but maybe we didn't have the same horses to do that. And I think that was probably our undoing.
And you lost a couple of close games in 91 that kept you out, from getting to a bowl again. You tied at South Carolina. You lost by a point to NC State. Those go a little bit different. It's a different season. And you guys actually started out real well your last season before, as we've seen at other times at Duke, it just kind of didn't come together. But in 1990, at the end of the 1991 season, going into 1992, you end up learning that the Giants have some interest in you. Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about?
Yeah, it's something I think on that Rich Eisen show, I think it's the first time I actually, talked about it publicly, but it was a strange time. I had a 5th year to come back to. I was fully planning on coming back. I went through spring practice, and I got a call from my father, and he said, we want to come down. Your mother and I want to talk to you about, what we've been doing. So, we were, as mentioned, spring practice was wrapping up. And I guess during that off season, the New York Giants were having these conversations with my parents, basically saying that there's a future draft coming out, and they're rating the different players. And I was rated very high if I were to come out the following year. And the Giants, as I mentioned, still had a pretty good team, and they didn't think they would have a draft pick high enough to draft me as a quarterback in the early rounds. So there was a thing at the time called the supplemental draft. And they said that if I declared effectively a year early, so if I could come out in the summer, if I graduated on time, that they could end up drafting me in a thing called a supplemental draft. Now, they couldn't tell me when they were doing it. It was highly illegal, candidly, what they were doing. But, for me, it was an interesting opportunity. And it was a long process where my parents had to convince me that this was real. There was a guy for the Giants named Tom Boistier, who was the head of pro player personnel. The GM at the time was George Young, and my father was having these clandestine meetings at hotels, in northern New Jersey, saying we need to set this up and how we're going to do it. And effectively, it was something I couldn't pass up. And looking back, I hate the way it went down. I hate maybe the way that I left Duke a little bit in the lurch, because I had gone through spring ball. But I do think it was an opportunity where I had a chance to play for my hometown team, be a first-round draft pick in the NFL. And it was something that, I really couldn't pass up. So, I announced I was leaving. I told Coach Wilson at the time I was going to declare early. I told Tom Butters I was going to do it. Obviously, those were difficult conversations. I told the team I was going to do it, which was the most difficult conversation of all. And I was overwhelmed by the support that my teammates had for me to go and do that and kind of, try to reach my goals and dreams. So that was a little bit of a big boost for me that the team was so supportive of me to go out there and try and do that. So I had to hold my own workouts. Again, this was all under the radar. No one knew I was doing this. The Giants told me that they couldn't come to any of my workouts because they didn't want to tip their hand if they were going to try and make this draft pick. So I held private workouts down at Duke, and one of the big workouts, I basically held a mini combine on the football field there. There were 28 teams showed up, their scouts, their head coaches, and they put me through a mini combine. I ran a 40-yard dash and did the shuttle run and threw to receivers. And June Jones was then the coach of the Falcons, and he led that workout for me. And coming out of that workout, there were teams who were interested, and I had to hold private workouts. So one of the workouts was Sam Weish. He flew to my hometown and worked me out. Bill Belichick was the coach of the Cleveland Browns. He worked me out, and then also the Kansas City Chiefs are working me out. All the while, the team that I wanted to go play for, the team that started this whole thing, New York Giants, never showed up once. Didn't speak to him once. And it was a really nervous time for me that hopefully this is all going to pan out. And in the end, I hired an agent, sort of tipped him off on what was going to happen. Probably the easiest job an agent ever had to do is when a player comes to him and tells him he knows what's going to happen. Here's the team that's going to draft me in the first round. But I guess I had such successful workouts with these coaches that other teams were now popping up and saying they were interested and were going to take me in the first round. So one of those teams happened to be the Cleveland Browns. So I think they had the 13th pick of that draft in the summer. And Bill Belichick called and said, we want to take you in the first round. And to me, this is before Bill Belichick was obviously the guy he is now. And I called my agent and said, listen, this is not a team I want to play for. The Giants have the very next pick. Is there a way we can massage this where we can tell them, kindly, no thanks, and let's go with the Giants? So he did what agents do, threw out a crazy number that I'd want to sign for, which spooked them. And the Giants had the next pick, and the Giants took me, and sort of the rest is history. So it was a really strange time. I was drafted in, I think it was around July 13th of the summer, reported soon thereafter to the Giants. And it was, a really stressful, crazy senior year for me in college.
Well, before we get into all that in your NFL career, there were two other things I wanted to cover with you. One, you did leave the school in good hands from a quarterback perspective with Spence Fisher coming on and playing, who of course was on the team that went to the bowl game in '94. But also I didn't ask this. What was Coach Wilson like as a head coach, and maybe how was he a little different from Coach Spurrier?
Yeah, Coach Wilson was a very a great leader. He was different in the sense that he was a little bit more hands off. He allowed the assistant coaches to kind of coach their positions, where, as I mentioned before, Coach Spurrier was offense coordinator, quarterback coach, wide receiver coach. I mean, he was sort of everything. So in that regard, he was different. I think he certainly was well organized. Certainly had a lot of respect for the team. But again, I think he was, he wasn't Spurrier. And I think at the time, the success we had at that university and the success we had under Coach Spurrier, it was a tough job. It was a hard job to be successful. And I think that was maybe one of the reasons that we weren't as successful, because I think at times he tried to be a little bit like Coach Spurrier, but no one's like Coach Spurrier. And I think that was, I think that, and maybe just the talent level. We didn't have the senior laden offensive line and the senior laden, leaders that we had in '89. We had to become those players at a much earlier age and grew up a lot more quickly. And I don't think we were as deep as other teams in '89 as well.
Well, tell us about your pro career, first with the Giants. You were there for 5 seasons? Is that right?
I was there for 6, actually. Yeah.
6 seasons. Tell us what your time in New York was like.
It was, again, it was a dream come true being drafted in the first round with them, working under Phil Simms. My rookie year was amazing. We had a guy named Ray Handley, who was the coach. That didn't end well. He was fired after my rookie year. And then Dan Reeves was brought in, and Phil Simms was brought back another year. I was his backup that year. Jeff Hosteller had moved on to go to the Raiders. So it was really, I had a great opportunity to learn from a guy who was in his 15th year, And we were very good friends. We trained together. We played golf together. He actually, taught me how to play golf. That was my first introduction to the game, and really had a great workout routine together. And then that's spring after his 15th year. It was going to be my third year. The Giants moved on from Phil, and I was named effectively the starter going into my third year, and that was amazing thrill for me. And I had to earn the job. There was another guy named Kent Graham who was my year as well. We competed for the job, but I had a really good spring and had a really good training camp, and I was named the starter after the third preseason game, and it was amazing start. I mean, we started at home against the Eagles over on Labor Day weekend. We won that game. Next game, we played the Cardinals in Arizona with Buddy Ryan was the head coach. We won there. The third game of the year, we played the Redskins. We beat them. So I'm 3-0 as a starter, all division teams. And we went to a bye week. And I was on top of the world. Candidly, it was, who could have asked for a better start than 3-0? We're in first place. And then coming out of the bye week, reality sort of hit. We played some teams didn't play as well. I didn't play as well. Teams I'm sure figured out a little bit of the things maybe I didn't do as well, and they game planned us, and we started losing, and we lost. If you can believe it, we lost 7 games in a row. I lost 6 of those in a row, so we went 3-0 to 0-6. I was benched for Kent Graham for the next week. We lost that game, and Kent didn't play particularly well. And then it was decided, let's go back and put me back in as a starter. So we were 3-7, and we played the Redskins and had a good game against the Redskins and beat them. And really, maybe the confidence that I lacked or was lacking towards the end of that losing streak, I regained pretty much overnight against the Redskins. Had a really good game there. Played the Eagles again, beat them, and we actually came all the way back to being. We were I think at the time 7. What were we? We were 8-7, and we had one more game to go, and it was against the Cowboys at home. And if we beat the Cowboys and the Green Bay Packers lose, we're in the playoffs. So it's an amazing swing where we're going 3-0 to 0-7 to potentially being 6-0, and we do actually go out and beat the Cowboys on the last game of the year. So we're 9-7 my first year starting. I'm 9-6 as a starter. And Brett Favre on the last play of the game scrambles against the Falcons with no time left to score a touchdown, and they go in the playoffs and we don't. It was an incredible play by him. Maybe not the smartest play, because if he gets tackled with no timeouts, the game's over. But he does do it in true Brett Favre fashion. So my rookie year, or my first year starting, I'm 9-7, and feeling really good about the prospects of where we're going to go. And kind of a little bit like what happened to Duke, we had a very experienced team, and they became expendable in the Giants' eyes. The team had a lot of veterans, and there was this kind of transformation about to take place, and I was part of that transformation. And so they let go a lot of the veterans and brought in a lot of more inexperienced younger guys who all were like me, all really wanted to play hard and wanted to win, and we just had some difficult years after that, and I probably didn't play as well. And I think we were 5-11, 6-10, and Dan Reeves was fired after that. And we brought in a guy named Jim Fossil, who actually was my quarterback coach my rookie year, and had a great experience with Jim. We were, I think, 5-2 when I was still in there, and I got hurt and missed the remainder that year. I tore my pec on my throwing arm. And after that season, I was expendable then. So I was released, and I went off to Arizona, and I went backed up Jake Plummer there for 4 years.
What was your time in Arizona like?
It was great. I mean, I love the area. I often use this analogy. I don't know if people are Bull Durham fans, but Jake Plummer was a little bit like Nuke LaLoosh, and I was a little bit like Crash Davis. I was brought in there to sort of teach Jake how to play quarterback. Jake had an unbelievable college career at Arizona State. He had amazing talent. He could throw the ball all over the field. He could move, but at times could do some things that were head scratching plays. And my job, because I was a veteran guy, I started maybe 70 or so games, in the NFC East. At the time, the Cardinals were still in the NFC East, and I was brought in to sort of be his mentor, teach him how to train, the things I learned from Phil Simms, the things I learned the highs and lows of being the Giants quarterback, I would sort of impart that upon him. And he and I had a great relationship. And I played some there. I probably started maybe 10 or 12 games when I was there, when he experienced some injuries and had some success out there as well. But my main reason for being out there was to teach him how to play and teach him the ways of the NFL, and had a great experience doing that out there.
Well, you finish up your career and then you told us about what you did after that. I'm curious, though, going from college, and you mentioned not being able to change plays at the line of scrimmage was difficult. What's the biggest adaptation from being a college quarterback to being a starting NFL quarterback?
Yeah, I mean, the easy thing to say, I think, is just the game's so much quicker. I think the quickness is biggest thing, but I think also it's the schemes. I mean, every week in and week out, you're going to see something different. And when I began starting the league, the evolution of the zone blitz was starting, and that was a huge problem for young quarterbacks because, at Duke under Spurrier, when you would see certain blitzes coming, basically they were going to play man coverage behind it, and you could exploit that. And that's why guys like Clarkson and others, we were throwing so many deep patterns, so many corner route patterns to these guys because we knew they were going to play a man coverage. When you go to the NFL, the early days when zone blitz started, they would show that same look, and they would drop off, and they would plant people in different positions where you didn't think they'd be. And that the advent of the zone blitz was a humiliating experience for not only new quarterbacks, but veteran quarterbacks as well. And now that's obviously been woven into the game in college, and there are ways to defeat it now. But man, early on as a starting quarterback in the NFL, that was a head scratcher for me and others, and caused a lot of pain for quarterbacks.
Well, do you have any thoughts on the current state of the program? We got a new coach in. I'm sure you keep up with the Blue Devils. Any thoughts on what we can expect in the next couple of years?
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think, obviously Coach Cutcliffe did a great job. I often tell people, if he didn't win another game, the things he did for the program and kind of getting them into competitive situations from the stadium being redone to the indoor facilities to the locker room, kind of the fundraising behind that and the motion that he created to get them to the point they need to be, I think was a huge thing. I think it was probably time, and I'm happy to see that it sounds like Coach Elko is the right man for the job. I don't know much about him, candidly, but I'm excited. I think the program, is something I follow. It's amazing. I don't think maybe the fans realize how involved ex-players are, from our own communications. There's a text chain that I speak to sort of every week. There's guys it's great that they're on TV so much because a lot of the ex-players will watch it. I don't think, candidly, maybe the 89 team and the teams that I played for are maybe as involved in the university as we once were. I think, maybe we're a little bit too old, and I think Coach Cliff's era maybe has her own, group of people, but know that sort of our group is very close still and roots hard for Duke and, thinks the best for them and wants the best for them as well.
You mentioned the indoor facilities and Cuthbert mentioned this a little bit when he was on, but tell us what the facilities were like that you guys had when you were playing there compared to what they have today.
Yeah. I mean, it's the current, I guess it's the lacrosse locker room and the soccer locker room. That was our locker room. That was the football locker room. And that was state of the art. I mean, candidly, that was a recruiting tool for guys like me to go there because the room was able to split into 4 different walls that come out and split the place into 4 different corners. And to me, that was, wow, that's amazing. We have this amazing facility. Our indoor facility was effectively card gym. When it rained, Coach Spurrier, as a quarterback, didn't like being out in the rain. No quarterback likes throwing in the rain. So we'd have practices in card gym. So, to look at what they've done, the Yo Center and the indoor facility and the stadium being redone, it's night and day. And they needed to do it, candidly. To be competitive, they needed to do it, and they need to do more. And it's an arms race out there. But I'm happy that the university has supported it so well. And I know Coach Elko and others will continue to look for upgrades and in ways that can continue to kind of, make the program more competitive.
One thing that I like to give everybody a chance to talk about is what they are most proud of about their time at Duke, on the field, off the field, anything. Looking back on your time at Duke, what are you most proud of?
I mean, it may sound corny, but it's the guys that I played with, the friends that I made. That '89 team. It's pretty amazing when we have these 5-year reunions. The attendance is pretty much 100%. Like I said, there's text chains out there. There's phone calls. It's the relationships that we accomplished something that not many teams in Duke history has ever done. We won a conference championship, and we sort of did it, our way. It was aggressive style. So I think that's first and foremost the biggest thing. Being associated, having a degree from Duke, doing all those types of things. Being outside of the football realm and being in the workplace, that Duke degree carries a lot of weight. And, being able to sort of hitch my wagon and say I was part of the university and part of the program is still a big thrill for me.
How do you think that the Duke brand has helped you throughout your career? Obviously, we've talked about it in football, but maybe in your business career.
Yeah, listen, people, they automatically think you're a really smart guy when you have a Duke degree. Whether that's the case or not, they can't deny the fact that you have a Duke degree. So that's one thing, and it's a hard place to get into. It's an elite company. To be a student there, and to be a student athlete is even a higher threshold. So to me, it's been everything in my career to be able to say that I graduated from there. There's a network in the business side that I deal with that are all Duke guys. So hopefully we all try to take care of each other if we can, from a business point of view. So it's, to me, it's everything.
Well, is there anything else that you'd like to say? You've been kind enough, taking about an hour out of your Saturday morning here. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about? I give people an open mic if there's anything they'd like to discuss. The microphone is yours.
Yeah, no, it's funny. Early on, when I was talking about my kids, you mentioned and you mentioned a lot about Maryland. I do have a little Maryland story I can tell you. So I told you I have 2 kids. I have 3 kids, 2 daughters who are both in college. My son is a junior in high school, and he actually committed to Maryland for lacrosse. So we're all very excited. So we're going to be Terp fans, and I know this is a Duke podcast, but for lacrosse, we're all in on Maryland.
What position does he play? My son plays lacrosse. They didn't have it where I grew up in South Carolina back then, so it's kind of an alien sport to me.
Yeah, no, he plays defense. He's a big kid. He's 6'4", about 205 pounds. He was a pretty heavily recruited guy, and we're really thrilled that he's going to Maryland. The coaches at Maryland were amazing, and look forward to watching him there in a couple of years.
Well, good. We'll root for him. I don't know if I'm going to root for the Terrapins.
That's fair. That's fair.
No, we hope he does well, and that he has a great time there. I do want to ask you this since you brought this up. Again, not growing up around lacrosse, I'm sure you guys probably had it where you were growing up. It's taken me a while to get used to the amount of head contact that there is in that sport. I mean, you played in the NFC East when it was still the NFC East. Does that ever give you pause? I mean, is it hard for you ever to watch that?
No, I love it. That's candidly, that's his game too. He's a physical player. My son also plays football. He's a quarterback for our high school team, but I think, I am all about, I love the aggression in the sport. And I love, obviously, not many quarterbacks admit to liking the aggression, but a lot of us, when the games are over and our careers are over, we kind of miss that feeling of Monday morning, waking up and kind of feeling your neck being a little bit sore and your shoulder sore. So I'm all for it. Certainly the concussions are a problem. I mean, I certainly had my share, and I don't want to ever, belittle the importance of that. But, if you can play a physical style and still, keep your head out of the game from a contact point of view, I am all for it. And I think he is too.
Yeah, the physical side of it doesn't bother me. It's just sometimes I feel like they don't do enough to police the head contact, which worries me because I'm in the personal injury field of litigation, and I see a lot of people when, rear enders, they get their neck snapped back and their head goes back and forward, and it kind of bothers them. So it's just always something that worries me. I'm just curious if you have any thoughts on ways to kind of police the neck and up contact to keep it safe, where you can still body people and play people, but still protect the head from any damage.
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think one, they mandated a new helmet this year, so everyone has to have a new helmet, which has better technology, which is a great thing. I think too, I mean, it's really up to the way you're taught how to play. I mean, I think, thankfully up in the Northeast, this is sort of the hotbed of lacrosse. And there's a lot of great coaches up here who actually played in college. And so I think having the ability to learn from, if you will, these, the best, my ability to learn from Steve Spurrier in football versus my son's ability to learn from guys who played in college who are like him in the college realm, I think have helped him develop and help players develop. But, it really is going to come to officiating. How strictly do the officials call it? I think kids are going to want to try and do what they can to get away with it. But as long as everyone's on board with systematic rules and the way the game should be played, I don't think it should be a problem. Now, there's always a one-off here and there, but I think with the technology of the helmet, the way the games are officiated, and more importantly, the way the game is taught, I think should help mitigate a lot of that.
Well, excellent. Well, Dave, thanks a lot for taking your time out of a Saturday. This was a great talk. Glad to have you on. Glad to have another player from the 1989 ACC championship team on to talk about that era of Duke football. It's a great era that I don't think we should ever forget about. It was a lot of fun, and my dad still talks in almost complete reverence about you guys. Spurrier was kind of a deity in our house when I was a kid. So I know he's going to very much like this interview. And for those of you who are out there listening, we have a few more interviews that are locked in for season 2. I've got to start making phone calls for later on in the spring and sending emails and getting people on board. If you are a former player, family member of a player, or a former coach, former administrator, you can shoot me an email, bullcitycoordinators@gmail.com. My messages on Twitter are open. Send me a message. We'll set something up. Go to our website, bullcitycoordinators.com, and we look forward to many more great episodes in season 2. Go Duke.